February 22, 2026. The remote mountains of Tapalpa, elite forces silently close the perimeter around a wooden cabin. A target worth 15 million attempts a desperate sprint into the wild brush. He does not make it. He meets a brutal end right there, broken in the dirt. Fast forward just a few days, a blindingly extravagant solid gold coffin is quietly lowered into the earth. No crowds, just heavy silence. It is the ultimate paradox. A glittering royal lid covering a miserable, lonely reality. Who was the untouchable kingpin resting inside that box? And exactly how did his massive empire collapse into such a pathetic finale? This is his story. But this story doesn't start in that golden box. Let me paint the picture for you real quick. Let's rewind to the dusty, unforgiving avocado fields of Michoacan in the 1980s. Poverty was the daily inheritance. A young Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes dropped out of school by the 5th grade, trading textbooks for brutal agricultural labor. But the fields were never going to be enough for him. By the late 80s, he crossed the border into California. He started moving the product, learning the deep logistics of the underworld in the streets of San Francisco, but the feds were watching. He caught serious federal charges in '86 and '92. After doing 3 long years in a United States cell, he was deported back to his homeland at 30 years old. Now, here's where his trajectory completely shifts. He did not go back to farming. He put on a badge. Nemesio became a municipal police officer in the state of Jalisco. Let that land for a second. The man who would eventually build the most feared syndicate on the globe was officially sworn to protect and serve. This is the detail that changes absolutely everything. He was not just a ruthless street guy, he had a front-row seat to a severely broken legal infrastructure. Standing on the inside, he learned exactly how the machine worked. He saw the dark cracks, he learned the exact price of a politician's silence. He understood how a badge could operate as a shield for the right envelope. He was enforcing the law while taking notes on how to completely dismantle it. It was a perfect education in street corruption, the enforcer holding the very system by its throat. So how does a local beat cop transition from taking small bribes to declaring open war on the entire government? What specific moment triggered him to step out of that uniform and become an absolute monster? He hands in the badge. The municipal system was far too slow and restricted for his ambitions, so he permanently stepped into the deeper shadows. He successfully aligned himself with the established Milenio organization, operating efficiently as a highly strategic enforcer. But his true ascension to absolute power begins with a perfectly calculated union. In 1996, he officially marries Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia. This was not just a wedding, man. This was a massive corporate merger. Rosalinda was directly tied to the Los Queenies family, a highly sophisticated international financial network. El Mencho brought the ruthless tactical street knowledge, and her deep bloodline brought the ultimate washing machine for the illicit funds. Together, they now possessed both the heavy muscle and the elite accounting required to build a lasting empire. Fast forward to 2010, the dominant, untouchable boss of the Milenio faction suddenly meets his violent end. A massive, unstable power vacuum rips wide open across the entire region. The old, established alliances with the massive Sinaloa syndicate immediately start to dangerously fracture under the extreme external pressure. Everyone in the underworld is holding their breath, simply waiting for a profound tactical disagreement or a major territorial dispute to officially spark the inevitable split. But here is where it gets incredibly complicated and honestly almost unbelievable. The primary catalyst for one of the most violent territorial fractures in modern Mexican history was not a multi-million-dollar dispute over shipping routes. It was a drink. According to deeply verified underworld lore, a high-ranking member heavily connected to the Sinaloa faction was attending a gathering in Guadalajara. During a minor, irrelevant argument, he accidentally spilled a cold glass of Jamaica tea, hibiscus tea, directly onto a rival. Now, think about this for a second, a spilled beverage. In any normal civilian setting, you simply apologize and grab a napkin. But in a dark world driven by extreme paranoia and fragile street ego, a stained shirt is immediately viewed as a profound, unforgivable act of public disrespect. That single, seemingly harmless accident instantly triggered their inflated pride. Brutal retaliation was ordered before the stain even dried. That spilled Jamaica tea ignited a relentless chain reaction of sudden betrayals and targeted removals. It rapidly escalated into a full-blown internal conflict that lasted for literal decades. The fragile alliance was completely shattered forever. Out of this ridiculous chaos, El Mencho saw his golden opportunity. He gathered his most lethal loyalists, broke away entirely from the old guard, and birthed an independent, highly aggressive organization, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known globally as the CJNG. A billion-dollar war machine was literally born out of a wounded ego. That ain't just street politics. That is the terrifying reality of giving unchecked and supreme authority to deeply insecure men today. Thousands of innocent lives eventually lost because a grown man could not handle a bruised ego over a spilled drink. So, standing completely detached and actively making powerful enemies out of the Sinaloa network, this newly formed organization had a massive target on its back. They had to survive, and they had to expand fast. What terrifying, brutal methods would this young, highly aggressive syndicate eventually deploy across the streets to truly claim the absolute top spot for themselves? To fully secure the vast territory, El Mencho knew he needed significantly more than just heavy muscle and relentless tactical aggression. He needed to capture the minds of the people. The CJNG aggressively launched a massive, highly calculated public relations campaign across the rural territories. They deliberately painted themselves as the ultimate saviors of the common man. They actively handed out large boxes of essential supplies during national holidays. They filmed and released highly produced cinematic videos claiming they were a strictly honorable syndicate, publicly stating they strictly prohibited any form of extortion, kidnapping, or harming the innocent. They desperately wanted the world to genuinely believe they were modern-day Robin Hoods, bravely stepping up where the local government had completely failed the citizens. They built a shining, untouchable savior complex to mask the absolute terror they were building. But let me keep it completely real with y'all. That was nothing but a brilliant, twisted illusion, a shiny marketing strategy paid for entirely by the illicit pipeline. You want to see the brutal truth behind those free bags of groceries? You want to see the actual cost of their protection? Look closely at the tragic, heartbreaking reality of El Limoncito. El Limoncito was once a thriving, peaceful agricultural community located deep in the heart of Michoacán. It was filled with hardworking, ordinary farmers dedicating their lives to harvesting citrus. Families knew each other for generations, but then the CJNG marked it as a highly strategic transit plaza for the product. The residents were not protected by their so-called saviors. They were completely crushed under the weight of the expansion. Today, El Limoncito is an absolute ghost town. Every single family was brutally forced to pack whatever they could carry and completely abandon their generational homes just to survive the night. The local elementary school, a sacred place originally built for children to learn and play, was violently transformed into a fortified tactical bunker during a brutal, uninterrupted 6-hour standoff. The beautiful Catholic church standing proudly in the center of the main plaza now stands completely covered in massive structural damage. Sunlight physically pierces through hundreds of jagged holes in the sacred walls, acting as silent, devastating witnesses to the intense crossfire. The abandoned, crumbling walls of the neighborhood are now violently tagged with the syndicate's initials in spray paint. The streets are completely silent except for the wind blowing over thousands of pieces of spent brass scattered beneath the trees. That is the real CJNG community outreach program. They did not save the people. They completely removed them from the equation. But here is where it gets complicated, and this specific detail should genuinely make you angry. Those high-caliber pieces of spent brass scattered across that abandoned schoolyard? They did not magically appear out of thin air in the Mexican mountains. They were traced straight back to a manufacturing facility in Missouri. The heavy steel tearing through those innocent communities was overwhelmingly supplied by the United States. The syndicate's defiance reached an unprecedented, terrifying level of audacity on May 1, 2015, in the region of Villa Purificación. The military sent a sophisticated Cougar EC-725 into the airspace to monitor the situation. The organization did not retreat into the shadows. They pulled out heavy anti-material sniper platforms and literally struck the military aircraft from the sky. 9 uniformed personnel met their end that day. It was a direct, unapologetic declaration of war against the state, but who handed them that extreme level of tactical power? Enter Eric Flores Elortigui, the prime logistics supplier who successfully acquired these heavy platforms through a sophisticated network in Washington and Oregon. Now, you would logically think federal agencies would immediately shut that pipeline down with extreme prejudice. But classified whistleblower documents later revealed a deeply disturbing truth. In 2020, intelligence officially located Elortigui hiding out south of the border. They had his exact coordinates. But the Department of Justice allegedly refused a temporary warrant request to bring him in and hold him accountable. Let that land for a second. The system knew exactly who was providing the heavy heat that was actively destabilizing entire regions, and they deliberately chose to look the other way. This perfectly reinforces what the streets have always whispered. The major federal agencies often care way more about seizing massive financial assets and building bureaucratic statistics than they do about actually protecting the vulnerable communities being torn apart by this endless pipeline. That ain't just government negligence. That is a calculated choice. And this, I think, is the most underrated part of the entire story. Because when you hear about the CJNG, you immediately think of the product moving across the border. But Nemesio was not just a ruthless distributor, he was a brilliant, highly diversified corporate boss. His alias, El Señor de los Gallos, the Lord of the Roosters, was not just a catchy street name for a rural farmer. It was a massive, highly lucrative international business model. He completely revolutionized the traditional underground cockfighting arenas. He took the violent, chaotic rural spectacle and turned it into a highly sophisticated transnational online gambling network, commonly known as eSabong. This digital network stretched entirely across the vast Pacific Ocean, sinking its deep, heavy claws all the way into the Philippines. It served as the ultimate, completely untraceable washing machine for their illicit revenue. Millions upon millions of dollars were effortlessly cleaned through digital wagers on fighting birds. But just like absolutely everything else the syndicate touched, it demanded an incredibly heavy human toll. Over in the Philippines, an estimated 400 individuals have been permanently silenced. 400 lives completely removed from the board, all over unresolved gambling debts tied directly to this exact digital arena. Think about that terrifying reality for a minute. A man sitting hidden in a remote mountain camp in Mexico is actively dictating whether someone lives or breathes on an entirely different continent, all because of a bad bet on a bird. It is the absolute peak of untouchable power, where human existence is valued significantly less than a fighting rooster in a dirt pit. That ain't just a business, that's an international monopoly on human misery. At this precise moment in time, the ruthless organization operated completely above the traditional rules of gravity. They commanded limitless financial resources, untouchable international networks, and a terrifying military arsenal capable of grounding the government's own aviation units. El Mencho was no longer just another cartel boss. He was the unquestioned supreme architect of a global shadow state. But absolute power always carries a deeply hidden, totally devastating cost. The ruthless streets never let you hold the crown forever without demanding a heavy payment. His authority seemed entirely limitless, stretching across oceans and borders. So, what specific force or what critical, completely hidden vulnerability could ever possibly step up to bring down this seemingly unstoppable, incredibly vast, billion-dollar empire? By 22, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel was no longer just an underground network. It had effectively evolved into a completely autonomous shadow nation operating directly inside the borders of Mexico. They controlled massive commercial ports, entire agricultural industries, and dictated the exact political landscape of multiple states. The financial revenue flowing into their treasuries was absolutely staggering, turning into an unstoppable river of wealth that could effortlessly buy any institution. El Mencho sat at the absolute apex of this global mountain, a supreme ruler commanding tens of thousands of deeply loyal, heavily armed foot soldiers. His word was absolute law across the territory. If he pointed a finger, entire cities moved. But this is exactly where the ultimate, most devastating historical irony of the entire underworld takes center stage. At the precise moment he achieved total domination over his rivals, the ultimate kingpin discovered he was a permanent prisoner. He wasn't trapped behind the cold steel bars of a maximum security federal facility. Man, he was completely locked inside his own failing physical anatomy. El Mencho was diagnosed with severe, irreversible chronic kidney failure. Now let that profound reality sink into your mind for a second. You command a multi-billion-dollar transnational enterprise. Your illicit pipelines effortlessly move countless tons of highly profitable product across every single continent on the planet. You have the unchecked financial capacity to easily generate hundreds of thousands of dollars every single hour of the day. You can buy anything, any person or any property on Earth, but you cannot purchase a single functioning pair of human organs. The absolute king of the streets was violently reduced to a completely fragile, broken invalid. While his foot soldiers were out running the streets in luxury armored vehicles and spending millions in extravagant nightclubs, the supreme boss was forced to completely abandon the civilized world. He couldn't enjoy a single dollar of his vast fortune. To survive the devastating disease, he had to build a fully functional, highly advanced, secret medical clinic completely hidden in the dense, isolated forests of LLC Waddle. Imagine the sheer madness of that scenario. A man with endless resources living like a hunted animal in a wooden cabin, hooked up to dialysis machinery deep in the wilderness while bugs crawl outside the window. He couldn't step foot into a legitimate hospital because the global authorities had a massive $15 million bounty attached to his name. His wealth didn't buy him supreme freedom, it bought him a terrifyingly isolated gold-plated cage. The supreme ruler of the most violent syndicate on Earth was entirely dependent on a sterile plastic tube just to see the next morning. It was an absolute slow-motion death sentence handed down by his own genetics, and no amount of street muscle could shoot their way out of it. He was completely cut off, trapped forever in a dark, silent echo chamber of his own mounting paranoia. He had all the money in the world, but he was completely running out of precious time, with his physical body rapidly deteriorating and his physical presence reduced to a ghost in the mountains. The entire weight of the empire began to fracture. He had the billions, but how on earth do you successfully protect your own life when you are forced to permanently hide in the dirt, completely disconnected from the very streets you claim to rule? The cracks didn't start from an outside invasion, man. They crawled out from inside his own circle. In May 2018, the ironclad foundation fractured when El Mencho officially separated from his wife, Rosalinda. Losing his primary trusted connection to the elite financial operators of the organization instantly sent his internal paranoia into overdrive. He pulled back deeper into the thick canopy of the Jalisco mountains, completely cutting off his inner circle. Suspicion became his shadow. He started seeing ghosts in every single corner, looking at his most loyal commanders like they were wearing federal wires. Because he was forced into absolute exile, he couldn't personally oversee the everyday operations of his billion-dollar pipeline. He was forced to delegate his authority. He handed the keys to the entire logistics network over to a trusted operator known on the streets as El Pepe. Now, think about the sheer pressure building inside that hidden camp. The pacing of the empire begins to turn chaotic. Erratic commands are whispered from a homemade medical bed. The strategic mastermind who once operated like a seasoned corporate executive starts making desperate, panicked mistakes. His communication lines are dangerously compromised. Outside the forest, the tracking grid is tightening with cold, mathematical precision. Military intelligence and federal agents are actively tracking every single digital footprint, mapping every vehicle movement and flipping low-level operators. The air inside that wooden medical cabin is getting heavy, man, suffocating. You have a global kingpin, a man who once commanded a literal shadow nation now reduced to a wheezing ghost, completely dependent on a dialysis machine to stay alive while the net closes in. Every snapping twig outside the window sounds like an incoming tactical unit. Every moving shadow looks like a calculated act of betrayal. He thought his isolation was his ultimate shield, but it was actually turning into his tomb. The machinery of his own creation was rapidly breaking down, and he was far too weak to fix the gears. The trap was set, the feds were waiting, and the circle was completely closed. So, what specific, fatal loophole deep inside his tight security detail is going to completely break his armor, and finally hand him over to his ultimate fate? February 22nd, 2026. The grand finale arrives and it features zero cinematic glory. The ultimate reveal behind the collapse of this multi-billion-dollar war machine isn't some legendary tactical standoff or a brilliant masterstroke by federal agents. It is basic, unchecked human lust. Despite running a global syndicate from a makeshift medical bed, El Mencho could not control his desires. His key logistics operator, El Pepe, coordinates a highly confidential midnight visit for the Kingpin's secret mistress. But that one sentimental movement sends a fatal digital footprint straight through the tracking grid. Intelligence operators intercept the exact coordinates of the Tapalpa cabin. A highly sophisticated joint military task force immediately swarms the isolated rural perimeter with heavy tactical weapons. The man who once ordered military aircraft shot from the sky tries to frantically crawl into the thick wild brush on failing legs. Instead of an impossibly legendary escape, he ultimately meets a messy, violent conclusion right in the cold mud. A completely pathetic, lonely end for an absolute monster. The supreme criminal throne is immediately claimed by Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, known on the streets as L3. For decades, this criminal dynasty aggressively pushed a heavy narrative about their pure family honor, regional pride, and unbreakable bloodlines. They wanted the world to look at them like legitimate street royalty. They acted as if they possessed an elite, unblemished lineage that set them completely apart from ordinary street gangs, but the public record just exposed a deeply sickening, hidden truth. Juan Carlos is the biological son of Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia. But his father isn't El Mencho, it is Armando Valencia, the founder of the original Milenio network, and Armando is officially confirmed as Rosalinda's direct blood uncle. This completely shatters every single illusion of honor they ever put on display for the public. Let that disgusting reality land for a second. The brand new Supreme Commander directing a global organization worth tens of billions of dollars is the literal product of a direct incestuous relationship between an uncle and his niece. Every single desperate claim about dignity, street morals, and protecting the community is officially exposed as absolute garbage. There is absolutely no real honor left in this bloodstained dynasty. There is no sacred bloodline, it is just a degenerate, highly toxic circle of insecure individuals hiding behind heavy armor and mountains of dirty cash. They tore apart entire cities, turned peaceful towns into permanent graveyards, and sacrificed thousands of innocent, hardworking lives, all while living out a twisted, unnatural reality in the shadows. The grand illusion of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel is completely unmasked, showing the world that their untouchable empire was thoroughly rotten from the inside out, before the first drop of blood was ever violently spilled on the Mexican pavement by their cold, calculated orders. Before we close this out, we have to send our realest, deepest condolences to every family, brother, and innocent community that was permanently broken by the chaos this syndicate left behind. The trauma in those rural streets is real, man, and it does not just disappear when the news cameras turn off. We recognize the heavy, silent, and painful toll paid by the vulnerable. Now let us look back at that final image. That blinding, extraordinarily heavy solid gold coffin, completely surrounded by massive, towering rooster-shaped floral arrangements, slowly being lowered into the ground at the Recinto de la Paz Cemetery. It looks majestic from the outside, a supreme final statement of ultimate street power. But let us keep it completely real. Inside that glittering metal box is not a legendary neighborhood savior or a righteous street hero. It is just a physically deteriorated, completely broken body, thoroughly destroyed by heavy projectiles and left to perish in the cold, isolated wilderness. All those countless billions of blood money flowing through his international pipelines could not buy him a single extra day of health or a peaceful night of sleep. In the end, his infinite wealth could only afford a final, pathetic piece of cheap golden vanity. A shiny, expensive mask desperately trying to cover up a long lifetime built entirely on raw brutality, crushing paranoia, and total loneliness. The vast empire he built did not protect him. It isolated him from humanity until there was nothing left but the dirt. When you look at that golden coffin, what do you see? The final crown of a kingpin, or just a shiny lid on a rotten empire? Drop a comment below.